Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you and welcome to the Select Board meeting for February 18, 2020. Just a couple of notes. The audit report by Barry Talbot and Royer, they aren't going to make it due to the storm tonight, and we consulted with them in advance. So they'll be scheduled for probably the very next meeting. If it's okay with everybody, I would add an item to the agenda, and that would be to name union negotiators for the union contract. It's just a very quick item. Is that okay with everybody?
Fine with me.
Okay, we'll move on to the minutes of the Select Board meeting of February 3rd, 2020. The minutes were in your packet. Were there any corrections?
I would move acceptance as submitted.
I second that.
Is there any discussion on that motion?
No.
All in favor? And we'll proceed with warrants 35 and 36. Dennis.
All right. Warrants 35 and 36 are fairly straightforward. I want to call them up so that we can go over them. Warrant 30, we're going to start right here with warrant 35. As you look through some of the bigger items, at the very top, just so everyone knows, that's a $650, a nice amount, but that again goes to transfer station maintenance, just in case anyone was curious about that. David Ledoux is our assessor, and you can see that item there. The architectural for Dirigo and the was, I assume, for the library/fire department. And the main municipal membership was due. It's that $3,623 thing there. The other sort of thing that sticks out is Overhead Door Company of Portland, the 2785. That is an overhead door that is going on the maintenance building. The overhead door so that it is a better... It just is better operationally, right? Isn't that how you would explain
Yeah, there
it?
had been damage, and the existing one was probably 20, 30 years old, so...
Right, and so if it drapes down and it coils right back up, everybody's happy.
Everybody's happy.
Good, okay. The last item you can see there is Taylor Stevenson. That's a completion of contract to service some of the roads and drainage and things of that nature. Other than that, that is warrant number 35. Warrant number 36 is very simple, and it is a... I think, are they both together then? Yeah,
35.
Yeah, 36, it's payroll. I'm
Payroll,
sorry,
yep.
yes. Got the wrong document. So, again, warrant 36 is payroll, and warrant 35 together with warrant 36 gives us a motion that I will make. I move to approve the warrants 35 and 36 in the sum of $51,466.21.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to approve warrants 35 and 36 in the amount of $51,466.21. Is there any discussion or questions?
Bruce,
Yes.
just, Dirigo, is this a progress payment, and where are we in terms of a balance for our engineering costs?
I can look at that and get back to you on the actual balance on that. This was for bidding support, so they had
Okay.
included a provision for that type
Right.
of work in the original
So
proposal.
it's in the bid package that they submitted to us?
Well, I guess not the bid, but the, because we actually had just single sourced with them and,
Yep, okay.
but in the proposal is what I meant to say, so.
Okay.
Yeah, it was part of their proposed cost.
So we're still in the ballpark in terms of the engineering?
Very
cost.
much so. As my recollection, which I think is accurate, is that Dirigo has been billing pretty well 100% because they're the lead, and then we had Mainland Development has actually been able to realize some savings based on their estimates, so they're probably billing at 80 to 90%. So we're doing pretty well in that.
We're doing
in that
well there.
respect. Yes. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? The motion's on the floor. All in favor? Thank you. We'll move on to Select Board Communications. Do any members of the Select Board have anything they would like to share or point to?
I sure do. This coming Sunday, let me say it again, this coming Sunday, we will have our first meeting for Heritage Days at 1 o'clock here in this very room, the Town Hall upstairs. It's our first organizational meeting for getting ready. This year we have a sort of a good, better idea, I should say, of things that we want to accomplish with some feedback that we received from organizations as well as the public. And we're very excited about some of the new sort of ideas and energy that we want, and we want people to join us. It's a great day. It's a celebration of a beautiful place, and that's Reed Field, where I love to live. And I hope that we get a chance to see you. If you don't come to this meeting, don't worry. You can still get in touch with me if you want to email me, dprice04355. That's dprice04355@gmail.com. That's my town email. Or just get in touch with me somehow, Facebook me. My stuff's on the website. But please, please, please help us make a great celebration, because I think it's worth it. So thank you.
What time was that?
It was 1 p.m., and there will be cookies.
Can we bring other stuff if we don't like cookies?
That is affirmative.
Anybody else?
Just no.
Okay, we'll move on to staff reports. Eric?
All right, so I'll start with the treasurer's report for January. We have a pretty average month. The one thing I noticed is that we were once again over our estimates for transfer station revenues. That continues a long trend of positive. I mean, and we were looking at not just the 20, 30, 50% increase, but over 100 and I think 150% increase compared to this time last year. So continue to see growing and stable revenue overages, which is wonderful. It'll help us to stabilize operational costs next year, and while that hasn't been incorporated into the budget, now we've seen enough of that trend to feel very comfortable that's going to continue. Also, I wanted to note that we are in the process of collecting the second half of taxes, and that those are due by the end of the month in February here, and so I encourage folks to just be reminded that that's happening. I'm very happy to report that we did not foreclose on any properties this year due to the significant effort of Deb and Teresa in the office, and I think Kristen helped too. Just a team effort to chase people down and talk to banks and really make extensive efforts to get those things communicated and get that revenue in. So that was a really positive outcome, and one that I wasn't necessarily expecting, but good work by the staff. So I did. We had the check reconciliation for the month of January. There were no issues observed. Again, a very standard month. For the most part, revenues and expenditures are right on target, about 58%. The one area that I wanted to focus on, but besides the audit, because that's going to be later, as you noted, is borrowing. And I wanted to report that we have submitted, and it has been accepted, our application for the main bond bank for the $550,000 for the fire station and library project. So that is in process with bond council support. So that was actually, part of that was in that warrant, paying for that extra legal expense. As far as borrowing, also, we have completed the process of financing for the backhoe at the transfer station. We're still waiting on delivery. Everybody promises the world, and we're waiting. But I expect that we'll hopefully get it sometime in the month of February. So I don't have anything else unless members of the board have questions.
Are there any questions? I'll just have go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, Bill, I need to have an extension cord. Thank you.
I would like to say.
Please do that under select board remarks.
What is
Yeah,
this?
that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Is this the Wizard of Oz with a voice behind the curtain?
It is.
I just want to point out how I love the idea that there are no foreclosures, and that hard work and extra sort of community support was there, valid, and thank you on my part to everyone else who worked. I know they do a great job.
Yeah, you have a good staff.
Yep.
So Eric,
have a great
and this may be in the wrong place, maybe we should be discussing it at budget, but can you quantify approximately how much a month the transfer station is realizing?
It varies by month because we do have Christmas time, we have a lot of material coming in. But I would say that this month, we were probably $1,200 almost, over what we realized last year. So I would say it's a minimum of $1,000 every single month. And during some of the busier months, we could be approaching $2,000, $3,000 plus. And so it is a real trend. And I don't know what else to say about it.
So the trend, so the reason obviously I bring it up is I'd like to see it incorporated in revenue.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. I have one
'Cause
more.
that's $12,000 or $15,000 we don't have to tax.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
And I
We're
think
collecting it
we've,
appropriately where we need to at the transfer station.
that's right. And I think that we've probably included about 5 or 6 of that already in the budget process, but the way things are going, we definitely will be adding.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't, overshoot it, but, I mean, if we've got a clear trend of 1,000 or 1,200 or 1,500 a month, we should try to reflect that.
Yeah. One point on that is that this isn't necessarily just extra money coming in that we're just raking in and putting in our back pocket. This is actually money that is helping to offset a deficit. We had been operating where we weren't even covering the cost of demolition going out in the tipping and hauling, let alone the cost of the staff and operational needs. So this actually just gets us probably closer to where we should be. It's not as though we're having a windfall.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make that point very
Yeah.
clear as I say that we are doing much better than we have in the past.
Because
And-
we were always operating in the deficit because we were paying much more stuff to go out than we were having it come in.
Absolutely, yep.
And this is due to revised procedures for collecting, for materials that are coming in.
Well, it's due to a few different changes that have happened at the facility.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's terrific.
Okay, great. Thank you. Do you have anything else?
No, I'm
Okay,
all
great.
set, yeah.
Can I go backwards? A very brief select board comment. The bathrooms look terrific, so a big thank you to your staff who has been working on those, and it works great downstairs.
Good,
The
I'm
new
glad.
sink is much easier to use.
Excellent. We'll move on to boards, committees, commissions, and departments. The library board minutes of January 8, 2020 are in your packet, and I appreciate those. We do not have members of the public here this evening, probably due to the storm, and so we'll move on to appointments, reappointments, and resignations. We'll consider the appointment of Stephanie Donaldson to the Conservation Commission, and in way of explanation, she was here at the last meeting, and we interviewed her. We didn't have the paperwork, so I kind of promised her we were going to approve her, and I don't see any reason why we wouldn't. So I am going to move that we appoint Stephanie Donaldson for a term through 6/30/2021 on the Conservation Commission.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Thank you if you're watching, and thank you for your patience while we got the paperwork squared away. All in favor? Great. We'll now consider the appointment of an election warden and ballot clerks. So the election warden is Sonia Clark, who is, I believe, served in that position before.
For many years,
For
yes.
many years.
Yep.
And then there's the ballot and election clerks, and you see a list of names that I assume that Deb will choose from based on availability, and they're balanced by party.
That's
right?
correct.
So even though you see more from one party than the other, they are, if there's 3 clerks needed, then there's 3 from one party, and 3 from, if there's 6 clerks needed, 3 from one, 3 from the other. So I would entertain a motion. Let's do the warden first.
I would move the appointment of Sonia Clark for the upcoming election as warden.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to appoint Sonia Clark as warden for the upcoming election. Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you. So we have ballot clerks that we will appoint, from which, and that actually, I guess the way we think of this is we're appointing a pool.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And so you have all the names. Can I waive reading the names?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Okay, may I have a motion?
I move to approve the submitted pools of ballot and election clerks as submitted.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the ballot clerks that you can find right in the select board packet. Is there any discussion on that motion?
Just thank you to everyone who does this, and as my own personal ability to speak out on this, these are the people who help run our elections, and their integrity is absolutely spotless. So thank you to those people helping maintain our elections.
Thank you. This motion's still on the floor, so all in favor? The motion was still on the floor, wasn't it?
Yes.
It was.
Because of the elections,
You didn't withdraw it.
the nuances around documentation, Deb has requested we have 4 originals for the upcoming elections, so I'm going to have to ask you to sign 5 pieces of paper.
In
Okay.
quadruplicate?
In quadruplicate, yes.
Thank you.
That would be quintuplicate.
Wait, hang on a minute. That's right.
Know your Latin roots.
I apologize. Oh, that's
Is that like quid pro quo?
oh, don't get that going.
We'll consider the resignation of Amanda and Mark Hebron,
Reben.
Reben.
Yep,
from the Recreation Board. So they submitted
together.
together.
Bless them.
Do we know why?
I think
No.
they're just busy schedules, and they have been serving for a number of years.
And their
Turns
seats are
out.
due in 2020.
Yeah, so I've worked with them a few times
Kids moving
on
on.
various issues, and they're just wonderful people who contributed a lot. So,
Yeah.
They're completing their terms though, right?
Yep.
Is
Yes.
that the way this reads? Okay.
I'll make a
well,
motion that we accept Mark and Amanda
Reben.
Reben's resignation from the Reedfield Rec Committee with regrets.
Second.
Okay, we have that motion on the floor to accept that resignation with regret. Is there any further discussion?
Just an opportunity to join the rec board. They
Now
do
with
a
this.
number of things, yeah.
Is, just one quick follow-up. What does this leave us in terms of committee membership right now? Are we close
that's
to
a-
being fully subscribed?
I think that's a fairly well-subscribed board.
it very much is.
Okay.
But we will have a need for some
Because
new
this
folks
is-
to step up. But yeah, I think it's full right now, so this would be opening up two
This-
seats.
There's not a quorum concern, in other words.
No, not at all. I believe it's a 7-member
Yeah.
board, so they
It's one of the
have.
larger boards.
But we have a lot of openings on boards and committees.
Yep.
I was watching the screen today.
But we can't post that until June when they're done, right?
I don't
We
see
can
why
post it
couldn't.
ahead of time, yeah. If we
Okay.
know that they're not going to be re-upping, I think it'd be appropriate to do that.
Okay.
Especially since the resignations have been accepted.
Yep.
Yep.
The way it's
did
written.
we vote
are
on
they
that?
Actually,
Not yet.
not
Okay.
yet. The way this is written, are they going off now?
Well, that's what I was asking.
It sounds like they are, because it says
No longer, yeah.
we are no longer serving on the rec board.
Well, we're going to accept the resignation, and we'll get that clarification, which will inform the posting.
Right, if it's now or as of June.
I mean, either way, I think we would probably post, but we ought to know is
If
that
it's right
that
off.
detail.
Dennis, may I have the folder, please?
Yes.
So the only other thing I would add to that is, I do want to thank people for serving. I realize some people will become busier and so forth, but I do want to thank the Rebens for serving all that time.
Yep.
So, the motion's on the floor, all in favor? No one's opposed. We're going to have a member of the public
Yeah.
here, that's great.
Yeah.
We want to discuss funding for the Reedfield Beach. So Eric, the floor is yours on this.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to thank the board for the direction that we received at the last meeting. I did meet with Sean Keegan, and that was what prompted this item, because we had a fairly in-depth discussion about where we were, hi Les, where we were headed.
Yep. No, not at all. You were from,
From United Methodist Church.
oh, okay. Great, good. Thank you so much. We haven't got to that yet. Are you going to be the only person here?
Yes.
Okay, we may take that out of order in consideration for you. But we're going to finish an item that we have on the agenda right now. So go ahead, Eric.
Thanks, sure. So, I met with Sean, and we discussed this, and worked on the budget to try to shape where we thought we could best position the beach for success, staying within the current financial constraints that we do have, and looking ahead. I'll just run through really quickly and note a few of the changes. If you look at the administration piece, we have no significant change in that, or no change, I guess I should say, for advertising and things of that nature. Insurance and workers' comp, we do have some changes there based on our insurance ratings, but that's really, again, not a substantive item. Personnel is where we see some changes, and they're not necessarily significant, but the discussion around it was. In the past, we've tried 2 or 3 different models of staffing at the beach. This year, we've discussed it and decided that in response to the suggestion that we focus on making it at the best possible place that we can, we decided that going back to a superintendent model made the most sense. So what we've done is budgeted essentially 10 weeks of time, $15 an hour roughly, plus the associated fringe costs. And we're looking to have that person do primarily programming and operations. We, in the past, have been paying people $6,000, $7,000 a year to check passes with minimal results. And certainly not focusing on the areas that needed to be focused on. And we heard the message from the board last time, and so the idea is that this person will focus primarily on program development to build membership, to build usage of the beach, and to make sure that the other parties that are involved, the maintenance people and anybody that's doing actual programs, have the oversight they need. It will be very much a superintendent type position. And if people have time to check passes, that's great. But it's not going to be the primary focus. So around that small dollar change is a fairly significant change back to a model similar to what we had about 2 years ago for staffing with the focus on operations and programming. Utilities, very similar. However, we expect that the issue that was identified with the lavatory was not a capacity issue, it was an oversight issue. So again, the idea is that this superintendent would be responsible much more so for making sure that that facility stays clean and is pumped out regularly. Because again, talking with Sean, it was a different issue than just not having enough room in it. So that is a priority. Equipment, we do have, and I guess I should back up to personnel a little bit. What we also have in those personnel costs are, I think it was about 4 to 6 hours per week at $30 per hour to bill out for town maintenance staff to actually do the mowing at the beach. That's the most surefire way I know to ensure that we get the level of service that we want and that we've come to expect. And we have the equipment, a large 30-inch deck mower, and it's right on the way as we go back and forth around the town. So I am confident there's value there, and certainly the ability to have that maintenance responsibility brought up a notch, not left to folks that don't do that as their primary function. So I expect we'll get better results out of that. It will be fair. It won't be tax dollars going into it that haven't been accounted for. And it'll give an opportunity for us to present a better face to the public, which I think is critically important this year as we try to move ahead. So I had skipped that, but that is a part of that programming. Or excuse me, actually, that's actually down under maintenance. I'm sorry. No, that's okay. Let me back up just 1 second. I got too many lines here.
We were in utilities.
We were in utilities. Okay, so moving on to grounds and maintenance, we do have $4,000 for maintenance. That is for work to the physical structures at the beach, repairs to the, primarily to the picnic structures, a couple $1,000s there, and also a couple $1,000s to bring electricity to the existing structure. Right now, we don't have power to that building. We don't have the ability to run power to that side of the beach unless we run it across the gravel parking lot with an extension cord, and then there's no way to run that operation. So we will do some minor repairs to that building, but my feeling is that the small shack down there is too far gone to really invest much in besides paint and maybe a little bit of work on the roof. So this puts us in a position where we're focusing on programming, focusing on maintenance and having a good clean facility, and doing what we can to up the level of the infrastructure in a way that makes sense. What we will have at the end of this, though, is a reserve account that has been drawn down to accomplish those capital needs, and a budget that even with a 20% increase in the fees that we charge, or no, excuse me, a 50% increase from $40 to $60, a $20 increase. That will allow us to break even with this structure, not including the $4,000 in expenditures for capital. So it doesn't solve the problem fully. In the long run, what we need to do is, at a minimum, add another 50%. So we would need to bring passes up to $80 in the future to accommodate most of the needs that we have at this facility next year, if we can maintain the membership. So that is
Or take a different path.
or take a different path. I'm just making that kind of progression to show what the costs are. And there are different ways to approach it, including the idea of having an article on this year's town meeting warrant to authorize that transition from a permit-based approach to one that involves a combination of programming revenues from having things like swim lessons and Tai Chi and whatever else might happen down there, in addition to taxpayer dollars going in generally, much as they do with the transfer station. So we still feel, after talking with Sean...
Or
that-
trails or the library.
Or trails of the library, yeah. We still feel that approach of changing the whole funding model is probably the most likely to succeed. We'll be watching very carefully to see what a 50% increase in the cost does this year. It seems reasonable given the fact that it hasn't been changed since 1983, but people don't like changes, and they don't like big changes like that. So I did look back at the revenues and usage over the past 5 to 6 years, and it has been incredibly stable. The only real variable has been how hot the summers have been. We might get maybe $1,000 extra in permits from one year to the next, but it fluctuates. And we can pretty much pinpoint and say, oh yeah, that was a really hot summer. Last year was a little bit cooler, a little bit wetter. We didn't have as much revenue the year before. It was blazing hot, and we had a good year. So this doesn't necessarily result from a change in attendance or usage. It's just that costs have mounted over the past 30 years, and we haven't kept up with the revenue.
Now, if we have programs that bring people in, that's the key. This person we're hiring is going to have programs.
It is, and it's something that we've tried to work on in the past. I'm thinking that we have a pretty good line with the YMCA this year. In the past, we had hoped that that person would organize swim lessons. That's a bit much to expect for a new program. So we are working with the Y, and we've been talking back and forth. I think there's a real possibility that we can get a Y program in here this summer.
Okay.
And that we can structure it in a way that it will pay for itself, at a minimum. So,
Eric, what does this do in terms of new structures at the beach? Is there anything in the future or consideration for that at all?
no, there's not, and that's one of the limitations of this approach, is we're looking to just clean up what we have, cut our losses with the old building, and not really even account for the need for, say, a pavilion of some kind, which I think is essential to bringing in more programming. So it's a very good point that you made, Dennis. And again, if we were to either increase fees by another $20 or another 50% to get up to that $80 for a family pass, that could get us pretty close, I think, to what might be a sustainable level until minimum wage goes up again or something else happens. But we'd have to be in that price range in order to achieve that, and that's questionable, I think.
Well, I think we should just, recommend that you incorporate these changes. On the revenue side, I think that's a longer discussion in terms of where we want to go. And I think it's somewhat for the next board to put into their goals to make a decision about 22, actually. The other part of this is I would actually throw the beach conversation into the capital meeting that we're going to have
Yeah.
with the, as a topic, with the budget committee. If we do build a structure down there, we should be very wise about it. And, you can see a shell with a storage part on the back or something of that nature.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be the architect of this by any
No, no,
means,
no, but I see what you're saying, right?
just be
Sounds like-
creative in taking a look at that.
I agree with the capital part becoming part of the budget process. And while it's not gonna happen this year, it's this upcoming fiscal year, it's not feasible, we're taking an operational step. But perhaps as part of the budget development process in the capital non-recurring section of our budget, we could begin some incremental financing for what we think it would take for us to actually accomplish what it is we want to do maybe a year or two out and begin to save for it now, do it incrementally so it isn't a big hit 2 years out when everything is falling down and we're really between the proverbial rock and a hard place. So I would suggest that as part of capital planning, as that comes to fruition, that we make some modest level of an appropriation to that non-recurring earmarked fund for physical improvements to the beach.
I think that's a good idea. And, the other thing, we talk about $1,000 here or $100 here. This is not a huge operational part of our budget
Right.
overall. So I don't see this as, every dollar is an impact, but I don't see it, I see it as a reasonable impact.
As a
area.
percentage of budget, if you were to plug in $2,500 in capital non-recurring for
Yeah.
an out project 2 years down the road, it isn't going to budge the mill rate. That's not what's going to do it.
And I just would like also to mention the fact that if we pride ourselves on the stewardship and conservation efforts that are rich and just received a new appointee, if we pride ourselves on the ability to get out and walk on trails in the outdoor space in Reed Field, then to me, the natural sort of course of action would be to continue to invest in our outdoor spaces, because those, I believe, are the things that make our town better, just all the way around. Not to bloviate about the membership amount, I don't want to continue to do that, but I think, however we end up doing it, the goal is that we recognize the beach as the beautiful place that it is, and our ability to get more from that space. And that's really all we want.
So Eric, do you carry a sense from the board then?
I do. The one thing I would ask for is that this model is based on that increase from $40 to $60. So I guess I would like to have the board's approval to increase that fee or those fees by 50% across the board for the beach, rounding where necessary.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, we did discuss previously that this would be a transition year and it would be a fee year, so.
I'll make a motion that we authorize the request from the Recreation and Beach Committee to increase the fee for this coming year to $60 for a family pass.
And other fees correspondingly?
Yeah, roughly. I mean, there
Would
will
you-
be some rounding,
Would
but
you
yeah.
add
And
that?
other fees correspondingly for day passes and
So
week
day
passes and
passes
so
might go up
forth.
50% too. I mean,
Yes.
okay.
Second?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Everybody understands the motion? Any questions on the motion?
Yes, this is coming from the rec department. Is
Yeah,
that what you're
well,
saying? The rec
it's-
department has asked this, because I wouldn't vote for this otherwise.
It's coming from all of us, from the rec department, from myself. If we were not doing this, I could not recommend the expenditure budget we have in front of us, because we've been running at basically a loss for the past 2 years. I just can't do that. We can't do that.
So
So
you can't recommend it with the current
with
operational
the,
model?
exactly,
And that's what
yes.
we need to
Yeah,
discuss and have
Yeah.
in front of voters.
That's right.
Sounds good.
And we are experimenting with a funding model.
Yeah.
And this is the first approach because it's fee-based versus taxpayer-based to the larger extent. And that's probably the preference for most of the people who live in the town, if I can presume to speak for taxpayers. So we need to take a run at it, see if it works. If it doesn't, then, as Eric said, we'll be going back to the drawing boards to see whether or not it becomes a part of a town budget with a fee offset similar to what the transfer station is.
There's some of us that are no fee as well, and I'll just
Yes,
say that for
yes, we
myself.
are.
Yep.
Well, this is a transition.
It is a
Yes,
transition.
it is. It's,
So the
Hey, we
motion,
gotta get through
experiment.
this to get to what?
Yeah, to where we want
the
to be.
motion is on the floor. Are we ready to vote?
Mhm.
All in favor? Anybody
have-
opposed?
No, but I have a comment.
Yep.
On the other part. So I agree, now our capital meeting is next Thursday,
Correct.
correct?
Correct.
If we're going to have a discussion, and if the beach is going to be a piece of that discussion, I would like to have some information from you on the actual capital needs, which would be replacing that changing shed,
Yeah.
having a pavilion. As Bruce said, it could be some sort of a combination, but we need a number to work with at that meeting in a week from now.
power
And
supply.
we also need to know if realistically
water,
we're looking at having any sort of a play structure. Because I think if we're gonna look at this,
Yeah.
we need to look at the actual making it the way it needs to be, so that it's safe and desirable, and people wanna come there and it meets the needs that we're projecting for programming. Then we can look at that and say, okay, well, this is 80,000, or this is 8,000, and then we have something to work with. I don't need something firm, but I would like a
Just
better
round.
ballpark than a few thousand.
Well, some of it is an earmark, as Ralph said, and I would caution us not to overthink this at this point. I think my purpose of asking for that discussion with the budget committee is to just get everybody to a place of understanding that we are now going to do something in the capital budget with regards to the beach. If we can make some steps in terms of very preliminary concepts, I think that's good. But I think we're gonna probably have to let more of that develop in a way that becomes a lot more specific down the road.
Well, Eric, can you share some of what you and I talked about earlier today about putting an article out on this year's warrant?
Yeah.
Get some feedback from the greater select board?
Yeah, Sean and I did discuss that, and the fact that if we were to make a change, it would need to be a 2-year process, because having, the authorization to fundraise, raise funds through taxes, would, having that in the same year as the budget would be very difficult. If it didn't pass, we would be dead in the water. So I think that it's very important to have some kind of a straw poll or advisory vote, or even a full authorization, depending on how we approach it, to make that transition, so that people can have that discussion. I think it's probably one of the harder discussions we'll have to have on a bubble sheet about what that means and how do you write an article that encapsulates this very complicated, long-standing piece of our town into one question that's it's a fundamental change, or could be. So I hope that we can get that on the warrant to enable us to start, say, saving for capital, or to add $5,000 or $6,000 to the budget next year to cover operating. So. is
Ralph?
that about what
Does
we're-
that question have to be binding? It could be a non-binding poll
Right.
at the tail end. It doesn't, it will at least, when you get a bigger representative turnout of the voting public, it will at least give you a sense of direction as to what they favor, and depending on that outcome, we could tailor our fiscal planning to match it. It doesn't have to be binding. I would just say, would you?
The problem that we were talking about earlier today is that it's the topic that probably needs discussion. And we don't have on the floor town meeting anymore. And so my suggestion was that we could have, if we had something proposed, it doesn't have to be written in stone, by our March public meeting, which is the 26th, then people could come and respond there and give us some idea and direction for just how we should even write something to put on the warrant. Am I right that it doesn't have to be written by that date?
Legal review is the 27th.
Of March, yes. Yep.
So we'd have to be pretty close.
We have to be pretty close.
But
We'd
it
have to
could have,
It could be adjusted,
it could
yeah.
be adjusted if there was input that night. And I think that would give us that first wave of, hey, this is a great idea, or wow, we really don't like this, and get some idea of direction to go.
I mean, we need their input, because they're gonna either vote it down or vote it in, so.
Okay, I'd like to probably close this discussion if you have a sense of the board, and there may be some
do.
more
Yeah.
working questions that go back and forth. Is there anybody that is dying to get one other word in? No.
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay, good, thank you. I'd like to, Les, you're here to talk with us on the Jesse Lee Church, right? Or answer some questions in regards to it. So with board consent, can we take 2080-083 out of order?
Please.
Yes.
Okay, so,
Let's do that.
again, we'll go to you, Eric, and you can give us a little background on this most unusual situation.
Sure, thank you. So.
That was really interesting reading.
When
It
I,
is.
about a year or so after I started, Robin Lint had given me a Messenger article that included some historical reference to land at the Jesse Lee Church that had been given to the town of Reedfield, with also some land given to the church. And I said, well, that's really interesting. I had no idea, and I don't think anybody else does or did that had happened. What has happened over the years is that ownership has, I believe, become a little bit vague or ambiguous, as the use has not been by the town of Reedfield, but rather has been by the Reedfield Unit Methodist Church and United Methodist Church. And so recently, probably a year or so ago, I was initially approached by the church to discuss this, and we talked about it and said, well, we should clarify that, and then it sat for a year. And Les Priest and the church have done some more work and some more review, and come up with essentially what is a proposal to quiet the title for that property between 4 and 5 acres that has been used pretty extensively by the church, but has not been on our tax rolls as a town of Reedfield property. It's been listed as the Jesse Lee Church. So I think that there's some real valid argument that that land probably would belong to the church after the use that's been happening over the past 150 years. There could be an argument made the other way, saying that, well, no, we have the title and here we are. This certainly seems to me to be a community related issue. The Jesse Lee Church is on our town seal. It is fundamental and core to the town of Reedfield. It is one of the most identifiable landmarks. I think the Union Meeting House is probably more spectacular, but people don't drive by that every day. They drive by the Jesse Lee Church every day, and when they see that, they think of Reedfield. So there, I think, is value in trying to resolve this ambiguity, and I would think that maintaining that building with an appropriately sized parcel makes sense, so that the church can accomplish some of the things they would like to do to make that more a part of our community through improvements and more active use. So that's kind of my understanding of where we are.
Okay.
And I appreciate Les and the church for bringing this forward once more, and their patience as we've worked to bring it up.
I'm going to ask Les to address us, to answer any questions.
Perfect.
And to give any viewpoint that he might have. But before I do that, when you mentioned it wasn't on our tax rolls, it's really not on our untaxed rolls. Because if it was town property or church property, this is not going to be revenue producing,
Exactly.
or has not been for 150 years. And we actually wouldn't expect it to be.
Probably 200 by now, but
Yeah.
Yeah, probably 200 by now.
yeah.
Les,
Yeah.
do you mind just giving us a little bit of viewpoint?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
if you go to the
yeah.
microphone.
I will, but I have something here I want to give
Okay, great.
you too. It's just a series of photographs. And as Eric said, it is on the town seal and just, it's kind of a cool building, really. But life is full of surprises.
Yeah.
There appears to
We
be.
found a driveway 2 years ago. Stand back there.
Yes, you just introduce yourself and then we'll go ahead.
Hi, my name is Les Priest. I'm here to represent the Reedfield United Methodist Church. Pastor would be present, but she's over in Jerusalem, the Holy Land. One of a lifetime times for her to anybody to do that. But years ago, we wanted to make some improvements on the Jesse Lee Church. And at that time, we said, well, let's try to sell a piece of land. We have an abutter that may have some interest. So we kind of approached all that. Then amongst that, we found out that in 1800, James Bowden deeded that property over to the town. And everybody had the assumption that that was church property. We've used it and we've done some improvements to it, but also we have a church there that we as a small community church, we're responsible to maintain it. And we just haven't had the income to do that, or the funding to do that. So we thought we'd sell off a small piece of land to an abutter and use that money for improvements. Well, that didn't go anywhere because then we found out that this is not something that we own, so we can't do that yet. We are approaching the 225th year of Jesse Lee, coming when that church was built in 1793-95, it was dedicated in 1795, and we're approaching 225 years of that. So as a church, we're saying let's embrace it and try to utilize the space, utilize the area, try to do some things this summer. But also, in the last year or two, we've been criticized by a number of townsfolk, as we should have been, because we've let it deteriorate. And as you can see some of the pictures there that I gave you, that on the bottom part, there is a lot of clapboard exposure, and it's over time is just going to get worse and worse. So And then we met with Eric and discussed what we'd like to do is go back to that plan again, is to put some money into the church. We may have to borrow it for now, but if we could possibly sell a small piece of land, then we could do that. At the same time, it's my thought, it's not the church's thought, I have to move this in front of the church, the leadership people there, is that if we could create some sort of a small parking area, that would be beneficial to the church, because we lack parking on the intersection, and also benefit the cemetery across the road, at times that they need to have space. So, you know, in the bigger picture, I guess it could be a win-win, but we need to take care of this matter at first. And then getting back to the tax roll piece, if a piece was sold, then that would be on the tax roll at that point.
Sure. Yes, Ralph?
Is the church on a standalone parcel? And this piece that you were speaking about selling, is that something that abuts the actual church lot, that would be part of a quiet title arrangement? Or are we talking two separate things here?
Two separate things. The quiet title would first take action to have the church legally be deeded back, or the property be deeded to the church.
And now, is that 136,014 at 395 Main?
Nope, it's 1-5.
No, it's all this.
Okay,
I think what they want to do is like split a part of it up.
And
Okay.
it is unclear because there's a quarter acre in there that belongs to the church, but it doesn't show up. I mean, it was deeded clearly to the church.
Okay,
Right.
so
But it
if
doesn't
we
show.
were to approve a quiet title transfer, is there a sufficient amount of property remaining, other than that quarter acre, that would allow you to split something off and sell it to an interested abutter?
I believe there would be.
All right,
It's,
so we're talking about quiet title for the existing lot and then approving a subdivision application as far as the town is concerned, down the road somewhere.
If an abutter purchased that, I don't believe you need to go through that subdivision process.
Would just be a lot line
Just-
expansion?
Mhm.
Okay.
And my question was, do you have an idea of how much you're looking, like splitting it in half?
No, I think maybe an acre, well, it need to be a legal lot, if you're gonna sell it as a lot, or if the neighbor wanted to expand their property, then that can be negotiated, the size.
So can I just do a thing, because sometimes I get thick about this? So we have this property, this Four Plains, right, and that's where the Jesse Lee Church is.
It's the
But what
address.
we're saying is that the parcel is what, 4 acres, did we say? Is that what it is?
4 or
total?
5. It
Okay.
shows as 5. It shows
Okay.
as 5 in the deed from 1800. It shows as about 4 on the ground with our current mapping.
Gotcha. Okay. So that land, what you're trying to do in order to create capital for improvements of the church would be to sell off a legal lot, which is 2 acres, right? So basically half of that land? Is that what we're saying?
Is it 2 acres or 80,000 square feet?
I don't recall. I mean,
Whatever
I
it
had
is,
gone down
whatever it is,
to it, yeah.
right, whatever it is, doesn't matter.
80,000 square foot is a
Right,
two-acre
right,
lot.
yeah, so they're gonna sell that money to then reinvest back into the church. And then that land is going to be sold to someone who abuts that current
That is the
lot?
plan at this point, yes.
Okay, and there's someone ready to go, you gotta,
We approached people years ago,
okay,
and at that time, they had an interest.
gotcha.
I didn't want to bring this back.
And
up.
in order to do that, I'm sorry, just make sure, just again, the thickness. In order to make sure that you can do all of that, what you said earlier, you proposed that earlier, and then you discovered the sort of wildness behind what's
Correct.
happening.
Yeah.
Now that the wildness has been discovered, fleshed out, and figured, you're here now, and that's the question we are answering tonight is whether or not to
Yeah.
give this land back over to the church?
or whether to move forward proactively with the quiet title process, or whether to try to assert municipal ownership of it and then go some other direction.
Okay.
So the quiet title would basically clear the ambiguity by saying, not us,
Great.
essentially.
Yep,
I mean,
gotcha.
I'm all in favor of quieting the title, personally.
Yeah, that seems the
To me, I mean,
totally
the-
normalist
the
thing.
use,
Is that a word?
the use has been,
I don't see any advantage to the town
I
to
don't either.
maintain its ownership.
No.
And
what are we gonna do,
if,
put a park there?
if the church is serious about renovation and looking at that building as I go by it pretty much every day, there's gonna be a serious capital outlay to fix things up. Cupola's in bad shape, louvers are gone, it needs painting, Lord knows what it's like structurally on the sills. So if we were to go the quiet title route, even if you couldn't subdivide it, at least you would own the property and you could borrow against it. And then you could also use the option of a lot of some size to capitalize the amount you want to borrow.
Correct.
So, there you go.
So what?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think we can, you know, I think it's in all good faith that that's the intent. When we're quieting the title,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to tie the hands
That's the
of
end of the
anybody.
deal, basically, yeah.
And they may discover a different way to borrow on it or whatever.
Yep. Let's do.
You know.
Is there a motion that needs to be made?
Well, there will be.
Yes.
Okay.
So I have another question, Les.
Yep.
And this, so the building belongs to the United Methodist Church,
Correct.
which isn't really the Reed Field Church, but to the
Well,
larger church owns all of the churches.
That's right, but who takes care of it?
The
We do.
local
It's
parish
on our
takes-
budget, we are the ones that go up there and do the work to it.
Right.
Hmm.
So this is a historic building in Reed Field.
Mhm.
We have another historic building in Reed Field, the Union Meeting House, who is asked on town warrants to have donations made from the general tax base for restoration to maintain the town gem.
Mhm.
And I'm just wondering, is that something that can be done with the Jesse Lee Church or not because it's a church?
Catherine?
I think there is a difference there.
Yeah, there is a
It's a
difference.
nonprofit, so-
And there is a distinction here, given the fact that this particular entity has a physical asset that can capitalize what they need to do,
Well,
as opposed to asking for town funding to do it.
prior to the Union Meeting House accepting or requesting really funding, they changed their charter to take away any religious affiliation. They went from basically being a non-secular to a secular institution.
Okay.
In order to, I don't know if it was a complete legal requirement, but it sure feels a lot better from a
Sure,
policy
separation of church and
perspective.
state.
Yeah. So I think I could ask that question of our legal experts. I think the feeling would be probably that it would be ill-advised, but I will ask the question.
Well, I know the main reason that we ever gave permission to put the warrant article on for the Union Meeting House was that they need to have the ability and grants to say that the town is supporting, and this allows them to use that as a funding mechanism to get more money, and they've been very successful at getting a lot of money. But, okay,
Well, they're
I just
very-
needed to
they're
ask
very
that
organized. The 501c3 is very organized.
Right.
They've raised a lot of money for that. It's a beautiful building. They will restore it and maintain it. You know, us, we're just, half a dozen people that trying to come up with some ideas on how to take care of this building. So,
and you have two buildings to take care of.
yeah, 3 with a parsonage, and to tell you, it's
Yeah, that's hard,
a tough haul.
Eric, will we have any legal costs in regards to this?
small.
Minimal, it would be, really, we just need to have our attorney look at it. I don't think that, if we take no action, I think it more or less handles itself, right, Les? If we wanted to object to it, it would probably add some significant legal costs. But the question about donations to non-secular organizations, if I think I have that right, would be a question that would have a cost.
Yeah, I mean, I just see this as a community relationship kind of item that with land that has some question, and it revolves back to use, probably was a mustering ground or something at one time too.
Plus,
So, I'm going to make a motion that we instruct the town manager with appropriate legal counsel if necessary to quiet the title.
I second that.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded, so now we have the motion on the floor. Is there discussion on the motion?
So my only discussion at this point is what we were just discussing.
Mhm.
Can this be seen as the town giving property to a church?
I don't think so.
And that would be what I would want legal
I'll
counsel.
explain my rationale to that. It's, when I use the word contested, I don't mean hotly contested. It's contested use in the sense that we could have used it and we didn't, and somebody else used it, and there was some ambivalence, if you will, about about the ownership of it that developed over a period of time. So I don't see it as giving a religious institution land, but I do see it as giving a community organization or participant, that does happen to be your church, I will recognize that, as trying to find exactly the right words here, a way out of a difficult situation in terms of not contesting it anymore.
I fully agree. I just want to make sure, based on the previous conversation, that no one would come back to us later and say that. So I think if legal counsel can just make sure that our reasoning is solid, I'm fine.
Yeah. And maybe somebody will, but I'm doing it as a good neighbor item rather than anything else.
Well, not only that, but the Reedfield Methodist Church is very busy in the community.
They are.
They're a very busy church, so they are involved in everything.
I think we also have to do this to clarify the working relationship, because towns don't lose land by virtue of adverse possession. So just because the practice has been there that we haven't taxed or all this, doesn't mean that we necessarily give up our right. So there has to be a formal process that says, we understand that the practice has been what it has been for X number of years, and we recognize that fact, and we want to do the quiet title transfer, because as it presently stands, it serves no benefit to the town, and it actually causes some difficulty for the tenant on the existing property, which is not something I would think we would want to do, given the historic value of the building.
Right, and, the other way of considering this too, and I think you addressed it very well, Ralph, is the fact that if this was a situation that was 15 years old, this would be a completely different discussion.
Oh, boy.
This is something that is,
1,800.
180 years old.
1,800.
Yeah, whatever the opposite of eminent domain is, this is what it is, right? It's like we don't,
220 years old.
so, yes.
And
Let's vote.
if they do sell it to the abutter, we do get taxes.
That's true.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, so.
There's a revenue offset.
So at this point, Les, is the plan that the church is going to pursue having the title quieted, and
Yes.
and Reedfield will just go along with that?
That's right.
That's the,
Great.
and
Okay,
we
the
have
motion.
plans now on reciting it, we've got quotes, we've got things in motion. We just need to
Great.
take care of this very
Release the
important
dam.
thing.
Because a lot of time has gone by and it's you need to do it quickly.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's how it works sometimes.
Great. Well, we have the motion on the floor. Is there any discussion on the motion itself? And seeing none, all in favor? Thank you. Thank you, Les,
Thank
for
Thank
you
you,
very
Les.
much. Thank you.
background information, and thank you,
Bring
Eric,
it back
for
to
that
life.
background
It's
Yeah.
nice to,
It's a beautiful
It
spot.
is a beautiful spot.
it's nice to
First
put a
thing-
face to all the signs.
uh,
You know
I
what
don't know
mean?
about that, but
It's
here I
true.
am.
It's true.
Yeah. Well, I want to go back and talk a little bit about what you guys were talking about before, about the church beach. I mean, the
Town
town
beach.
beach, the town
Sure,
beach.
go ahead, make a comment.
That is a
You can't
real
have that,
gem.
Les.
Huh?
Yeah, so you can't have that.
No. Well, my-
Location, location, location.
Too close to wetlands.
Yeah. But we did have a service there this past summer.
Yeah,
But that is a real gem for this town.
Yeah.
I've worked with a lot of towns that wish they had a beach. And
Yes, sir.
some towns have tried to buy land that I've had, and the townspeople have said no. But this town is, got something that a lot of towns don't have. And, thanks for bringing that up and having good vision for it.
Thank you very much, we appreciate that.
Well, and if you want to come back and participate in that discussion when we have it, that would be very useful
It
information.
does carry water. I mean, I gotta tell you, Les,
No
as
pun
a side note,
intended.
I want the beach to be free and I want the programs because I think it is a gem. But knowing that if that weighs into whether or not people move to Reed Field, that could carry some,
It did for me.
absolutely, yes, sir.
I thought it was attractive when I moved here
Amen.
in the
But
90s.
What I was saying is if you came to whatever public meeting we would have about that, for people to hear from someone who's in the real estate business, that's different than hearing from any of
Us
us
goofballs.
as a personal opinion as opposed to a professional opinion, so.
I drive by that when I bring people through town, I go by that and say, this is the town beach.
Yeah.
Don't do it when the geese are there.
Thank you, Les.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, appreciate
Good
it.
night, Les.
Awesome. All right.
Okay, thank you. We'll move to old business again.
Yep.
And we'll consider the pending real estate foreclosures and review the waiver process. So there are no foreclosures to consider that are pending, is that correct?
There are none.
Okay, but we do want to talk about the waiver process because we've discovered something there.
Yep.
Eric?
Yes, so what we discovered in reviewing this, as we do every year, and different situations raise different questions, we discovered that the article that we have in our administrative ordinance authorizing the select board to waive foreclosures is actually contradictory to state law. So we need to fix that.
Good for us.
Yeah, that's,
I mean, you asserted that authority, and it stood for a while, but state law states pretty clearly that that authority rests in two places. First, with town meeting, and I did check with MMA on this, who have been dealing with this issue a lot over the past 20, 30 years. And their feeling is that the way that state statute was put together, it is intended that this is not an authorization that's a blanket authorization if the town meeting were to approve a waiver. It has to be a town meeting to start, and then town meeting has to authorize that waiver. Once that happens, the treasurer then has the ability to move forward and complete the process through a waiver. But so those two things have to happen in succession. The select board has no role other than to perhaps shepherd that. What we have currently is something that says that the select board, 1 week before foreclosures or 2 weeks before foreclosures, will make a determination as to whether or not to waive. And that is pretty far from where we need to be. My recommendation on this is twofold. First, that we just strike the language from our administrative ordinance because state statute is clear and sufficient, in my view. And that we change the language in our foreclosure process policy or policy for tax-acquired property. It always struck me as odd that the policy on tax-acquired property looked backwards and said, oh, by the way, before all this stuff happens, you should be doing X, Y, and Z, and the select board does all this other stuff. I couldn't quite figure it out, and I finally understood why it didn't make sense this year when I did that research. So my hope is that we can do two things. Have the select board at some point strike that language in the policy and revise it to more clearly reflect the intent. Perhaps even adding a section or a separate policy that talks about what happens before foreclosure and how we might go about a waiver. But then definitely a change through a town meeting vote to that administration ordinance to strike that illegal language.
So I
That's my summary.
would just go ahead and I put that to town meeting as a question. We'll have to put that ordinance up. And then that would dictate us to change the
Policy.
policy.
Yep.
I mean, we can work on the wording in advance and do the practice correct, but, really, the ordinance is gonna order us to do the policy.
Absolutely, yeah. And the policy, there is, the one thing I want to point out about that is that we should have a policy on when we initiate the process of review in order to give ample time for a special town meeting, were one required, so that we could exercise this option if we wanted to.
So can I let you work on that?
Absolutely, I'm going to tell you
Okay.
I'm going to tell you what I'm thinking. but,
So on the waiver of
it's there.
foreclosure,
yeah.
basically, all of that has been very confidentially treated in the
It
past.
has.
So, I mean, I'm not even sure how you do that confidentially at a town meeting vote.
You
You
don't. The whole
It isn't
purpose is for.
confidential.
It isn't, yeah. It's one of the things that's just wide open. And the purpose is not for poverty. It's not for anything like that. The only valid reason, and this is where the statute is a little bit ambiguous, is for something that might become a burden to the municipality. Maine Municipal has interpreted that mean hazardous waste sites and 100-acre junkyards.
Buildings to tear down,
Buildings that
that
are,
sort of
in,
thing,
you know,
yes.
and not even necessarily a full cost benefit assessment, but something that would clearly be a hazard and a burden. If the town had to tear down a building, that might not be a burden if we can sell the lot for
Right.
$10,000.
Right.
So that's the kind of review that we want to do, and really only if we expected foreclosure to happen. Waiver of foreclosure doesn't take away the lien. The lien would still be there, and the town could have the option of exercising it in the future
Okay.
through court
But
action if we
When you
chose.
place the lien, I can't remember what the statute says. When you put a lien on it, does the clock start ticking on foreclosure?
Yes.
All right, so how does the town protect itself if it simply wants to send a signal to maybe the mortgage holder or somebody else that we don't really want to foreclose, we just want to, turn the heat up a little bit to get you to pay your taxes? How does the town protect itself from going to a foreclosure that it might not want to do?
That's what this process would be, the waiver of foreclosure, because we don't lose the money. The money's still out there. What we do is basically indefinitely delay the actual possession, taking possession of the property by the town.
So that's part of the lien process gets fine-tuned and enhanced to give us latitude to delay foreclosure?
It wouldn't be part of the lien process, it's a separate function. But basically what it says is that the lien stays and we don't automatically foreclose because state law provides for automatic foreclosure unless
Okay,
this
so you
one thing
can-
happens.
So we could lien property and not have to worry about foreclosing.
Yes,
If
in
you
the
have a town,
circumstance where
if
it's
you
part
have
of
a
the-
town meeting
yeah.
vote prior to the foreclosure
Yep.
date. So this all has to
So
happen
the
in
foreclosure
December, say.
trigger happens at town meeting, the lien stays there, which allows you to have the town meeting.
Not exactly. So what would happen is if we had a property that was liened, it would have been liened.
Sure.
We have a 18-month process.
Mm-hmm.
What I would expect is sometime 2 or 3 months prior to foreclosure, as I typically do, I would go through the list of properties that have past due taxes and are potentially foreclosed upon. Look through it, and if I see something that looks like.
And these are several years back.
3 years back, yeah, basically. If I see something that's a problem, I would then bring it to the select board, who would then call a special town meeting. That special town meeting would then vote whether to waive foreclosure or not. And if it was voted to waive the foreclosure, that would absolve the town of having to take possession automatically, but would protect our rights to collect the money in the future through a court action.
And the town is always first in line for back due taxes to start with.
I think generally, except for cases of bankruptcy,
Okay.
but that gets into the
Yeah,
weeds a little bit.
Then you just slice
yeah.
the pie, but we get a cut.
So you're saying this would go to a special town meeting, not a regular town meeting?
Well,
Correct.
it would have to be, unless, it would have to be, because foreclosures happen in February.
Yeah, okay.
So it would have to be a special town meeting.
And you could do this at a public meeting versus a private
We
ballot?
could, so we wouldn't have to do the secret ballot. It could be, the town always has the option of having a special town meeting that is just a standard on-the-floor town meeting, where we say, 15 to 10 days notice, raise your hand if you want to do this, here's the explanation, thank you very much. It could be accomplished, but it's still a process. Yeah.
And
So-
foreclosure has always been 100% transparent.
Yeah.
We don't advertise it, because that isn't really the neighborly thing to do, but it's only poverty abatements that the select board does in private.
That's correct.
So, I mean, would you like a vote tonight to send this ordinance to town meeting with the edits? Or do you want to review the ordinance further in case there's anything else you want to do with the administrative ordinance? I can also see renumbering might be something you want to do.
Yeah, if I had my preference, I'd probably just take out that numbering. It's such a small ordinance that it really,
Yeah.
I took out the subject category listing, because that was
I think
just,
that's fine.
not sure why that was there, but we could make a few more changes to it, but I think that a placeholder saying that, yeah, this is a good start would be appreciated.
Okay. Do you want to vote for that, or do you have the sense of the board?
I've got the sense of the board.
Okay, good.
Um,
Let's move on to,
Are we not doing the audit?
we're not doing the audit.
They didn't come.
They're going to be rescheduled due to weather.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I was
And
late.
speaking
Due to weather.
I should have clarified that I did also let Kristen know that instead of driving back and forth in the snow, that she would be excused tonight, and she could watch the video. So that's why she's not here to recount
She's
the
watching from
motions.
home.
Yeah, I don't know.
Sure she is. Taking notes.
Okay.
So
We'll
we're up
move
to
on then
84.
to the one-year
Fuel,
extension of the
yeah.
snow and ice contract, which is number 84. Eric, does Cushing Construction want to extend the snow and ice contract for a year?
They do. I had a discussion with John, and we've had many discussions over the past 3.5 years about the contract, the process, the challenges, the things that work, the things that don't. And I will say that I appreciate the flexibility that we've had with John. Everybody runs into trouble now and then. Everybody hits a mailbox now and then. And I'd say I've been generally quite happy with how this contract has gone, and John has as well. So we're both in agreement that this would be a very positive thing to continue for a fifth year.
And does that yield a signed document or initials or
I
something?
think it would, the authority to do this rests entirely with the select board, so a select board vote would effectively extend the contract.
Okay,
I'll
And
make,
that's listed in part 2 here.
Yeah.
okay, great.
I'll
So
make a-
instead of May 2020, it'd be May 2021, huh?
Yes.
I'll make a motion for the town of Reedfield to extend the current snow and ice control contract with Cushing Construction LLC of Reedfield to go through May 1st, 2021, as
Second.
provided by the contract.
Second.
Okay, the motion's on the floor. Does anybody need it clarified? Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Are you
I was late. I was
Just
late.
a little
You're delayed in favor?
Late to go?
Have another sip
Did
of
he
coffee.
get your
Wake up.
mailbox, Dennis? Is that why?
I'll clarify that the vote was unanimous.
Yes, thank you.
We'll move on to the third draft of the budget. And Eric, I find this summary revision sheet to be the most helpful
That's
in
where I was gonna start.
Absolutely.
tracking.
Yeah,
So
good.
I've
Fantastic.
built my questions off of that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right, so I did include a full summary of the budget. This is not the full trio printout, this is our more explanatory visual packet that we typically hand out. I will say generally that we're still in a very good position. We still have a nearly flat level of expenditure. If we account for the things that are outside of our control, increases to the county budget, increases to spending for dispatching and other services, that we're essentially flat. So I'm pleased to say that even with changes, including the addition of that $25,000 increase to the reserve for the municipal buildings project, so we're up to 75 for that. We're still in very solid position. And we've done that a few different ways, but one was the actual clarification of the borrowing costs for the fire station and library project. It helped itself out because the way the funding worked for the calendar year and versus or the fiscal year, I should say, versus when the borrowing happens and when our payments are due, we do just have one interest payment. I had budgeted initially for a full interest and principal payment for that year. So that actually pulled something on the order of $35,000 right out of the budget, which will made a lot of room this year, but also gets us over that hurdle. Next year, we will be retiring another bond,
Okay.
and we're back in the
So we
clear.
won't find ourselves in a situation like RSU 38 where they only paid interest and now we're getting hit with principal and
Absolutely,
interest this year.
and that's one reason why we kind of put
Okay.
this project on the edge of that schedule, and it has worked out,
Serendipity.
serendipitously, yes. So those are some of the biggest changes. We've also increased, following discussions with Mr. Davinsky from the Winthrop Ambulance Service, some sizable increases there. That's going to be a 20% increase. We're going to see another one of those next year. And that's one that I think is worth pointing out and tracking. The ambulance service has had increasing costs. One of the biggest increasing costs they've had is uncollected service fees. They've also seen a reduction in revenue as they're receiving less payments from insurance companies that do pay. So overall, the costs have gone up, and the one area that they're focusing on really and trying to collect on, but again, there's probably 6 to 8% that's uncollectible, no matter how many collection agencies you call after people. That's been a driver, and they are stepping up this increase. We're basically on the hook for about $15,000. They're hitting us with about $7,000 of that this year, if I remember correctly. So
So you said it's 20%. Do you have a dollar amount without me flipping back through?
let's see here. About $7,000.
Is the increase?
Is the increase, yep, 7 to 10. I don't,
Okay.
yep, it's in that range.
And following up on dispatch, that is separate from the county?
Yes, well,
Yes.
we have
There's
Winthrop
two.
dispatch. We also have Franklin County
Okay.
dispatch. We also have the third dispatch, which is,
Somerset?
Is that
or
Gardner?
maybe I should have said Somerset, not
Somerset.
Franklin.
Right.
Somerset, Winthrop, and Augusta are the three that we have to navigate.
Okay.
Did you have a follow-up on that, Bruce, or?
No, I do want to go back to the 50 to 75,000 on the
Yes.
capital expense for municipal buildings. So what's the revenue stream that feeds that?
In large part, I guess in whole, depending on how you look at it, it would be the reduction in the budgeted debt service that we were going to have for, we started off with, I think, about $50,000 in debt service for the bond. In actuality, the interest payment this fiscal year will just be $15,000, so that puts us at 35. So that more than covers that increase and helps cover some of the other increases in other areas.
Okay.
There have also been changes to the use of the designated and undesignated funds. Looking at it, I thought it would be more responsible to pull less out of the designated road fund and pull more out of the undesignated fund. So that is one of those tweaks that I put in place because I do foresee significant increases in cost over the next few years for longer stretches of road. Say we do not Plains Road, we do Sturtevant Hill Road or Church Road. Those are both 2 mile plus, some of them are 3 miles long. So we need to have more money in that account, and I think it just makes sense to, as you were talking about with the beach, make sure that that stays in those accounts so we can have it when we need it.
It didn't look to me like that additional use from the undesignated fund and that swap puts us in any kind of jeopardy in terms of 2 months of operating costs.
Not at all,
We're-
yep.
And we always underspend and over-collect
That's what we
at the
try
end
to
of the
do.
year.
Yeah,
You know, I
That's a
can see
trend.
the history here,
yeah.
which maintains that fund balance to a respectable amount that gives us our cushion.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and that has been, we did reduce that a little bit with last year's fiscal budget, and this year, I think we'll see the same thing happening again. But still, that reserve is very healthy, and I try not to get too far ahead on it, but I did look at some projections for between 5 and 8% increase in the RSU budget. Even with those increases, our reserve is still within the threshold.
And
So-
that's where we're gonna have to make it up.
Yep,
Eric,
as we do, always.
I'm only seeing on line 11 that we added 50,000 for contingency to the building projects.
Yes.
Did you add another 25?
I did, and I'm trying to see where that would have showed up. There's a chance that I didn't make a note of that here. However, if you look, I will make a statement before I read it, but it should be under the expenditure line. If we go back to page, I guess it would be that's the revenues. I'll keep going back here. It would be under the capital reserve section, which is 65 or 70. I think it's 70.
Page 65.
Department 65.
Oh, okay.
Excuse me.
Capital improvements.
I think it's 70 actually, but 65. It is 65.
I'm going the wrong.
So then we have if you go down to line 12, so Department 65, Division 12, Municipal Buildings, I did put that at 75.
So it's 575,000.
Well, no, it's 75,000.
I must not be on the right page.
So it's the,
Oh, shoot, I just.
of this budget report, you have the first page, which is the cover page, you have the second page, it would be the third page in, and it
Okay,
is
I'm in the
for
wrong spot then.
expenditures for capital improvements, which is Department 65, and the division is Division 12.
There are too many things.
Keep going back, yeah, I think, should be that one, is that 65?
Yes, that's
Yep.
65.
Okay, so then three down is Division 12.
Municipal buildings is
And
75,000.
75,000,
Thank
so I
you.
did increase that. I will make a note that I made that change
Okay,
on the,
on that tally
the
sheet.
tally sheet, yeah.
Thank you.
And that's a reflection of what we anticipate the fire company is going to be.
No,
Again,
that's,
For contingency.
That's for the whole building project.
it's for the
right?
whole building
For the whole
project, and I
project.
would say it is not what we anticipate, but what is a more,
Okay,
a safer buffer.
it gives us
right.
our cushion.
A little bit of semantics there, but yeah, it's,
okay.
yeah,
It's what we discussed at our last meeting
there we go.
that we
yeah.
needed, and you did it, but it didn't show up on the tally sheet, but it is in the numbers.
Yes.
Okay.
Just dotted our i's.
When you awarded the bid,
Almost our D.
what response did you get?
We have a pre-construction meeting scheduled for, I believe, next Thursday. So positive.
Okay.
Anything from, any pushback from the,
No,
Other
we,
bidders?
we did get an email from Blaine Casey, who would have been the runner-up, and was the only real competitor on that
Right.
project, basically stating that they believe we would get a good quality product with SJ Wood. So
Oh, okay.
as much of a nod as you could
so
expect.
it was conciliatory after the initial exchange,
Well,
to the extent they could.
I don't want to even
I'll
speculate
say
on what it means,
I'll
but,
say, you don't have to.
Are there other questions on the budget at this point? We're going to be seeing this again and again.
Right.
yeah, I will point out that we have that joint meeting on capital next Thursday.
Yeah.
Sit here at 6:30. It's going to be
6:30.
a fairly involved meeting with basically 9 to 10 people in attendance, I hope. And we'll go through it and we'll have the discussion similar to what we had last year, where we talk about medium-term, basically 5-year plans, with some extrapolation where necessary or appropriate to look further into the future. But my hope is we can focus very much on the 5-year plan.
We don't televise that meeting, do we?
We do.
We
typically.
do televise it, okay.
And will there be a packet ahead of time for that meeting?
Yes, there will.
Okay. And do we expect that to run until 8:30?
I don't know, I think it might be closer to 8, I think an hour and a half would probably be sufficient, given the amount of work that was done last year to really flesh a lot of this stuff out. But any project could take half an hour if we get too far off track, so I'd say it
8:30
depends
would
on
be a
the,
closing time.
I wouldn't think you want to go any further than that.
You okay?
Arms up.
You okay?
Coffee went down.
As
the
long as
wrong-
we don't go to 9 o'clock, she won't
Yeah,
choke.
yeah.
I took a Sudafed for the allergies and drank it with coffee. Was a good choice.
Buzz.
Sorry.
We learned.
Okay, so, are we all set to move on then?
I believe I am.
Okay.
Nicely done, Eric, again.
Let's conduct the first reading of the food sovereignty ordinance. And so that's in your packet.
Now, did we make any changes that those people recommended?
I didn't,
I didn't see
We
any.
did.
We did.
okay, I
we-
didn't see it.
I think the seafood's out, right?
Because it's a first reading, I put it as a clean copy, the seafood is out.
Okay.
I do want to point out that we had a discussion around only allowing Reedfield residents or some way of making sure that people don't come into the town and just sell their wares. That was actually already addressed in the ordinance language. I think it was section, where was it? Direct producer to consumer transaction is defined as a face-to-face transaction, this is 2A, involving food or food products at the site of production. So that basically says that if it has to be
Has to
at
be
the
in
site of
Reedfield,
production. So if you make cookies, they have to be here. If you catch the fish, for example, in Brunswick,
You can't
you
sell it.
can't sell it here. The one thing that I do want to point out about that shellfish piece being taken out is that it does, it was in a definition that related to food broadly. And so by taking out that shellfish, I don't know if it necessarily precludes someone from making crab rangoons in their house and selling them on New Year's Eve to their neighbors with crab meat from Brunswick. That's the one thing that I think is a little bit gray, and somebody could argue and say, it doesn't specifically exclude seafood, it was produced in Reedfield, it meets the criteria.
I'll take on the crab lobby when they come.
Well, you can look at it, anything, if somebody bakes something, they bought the flour someplace
Well,
else.
yeah, so that's
Right.
exactly my point.
It's an
Yeah.
ingredient
Yeah.
rather than the actual
The
product.
product,
You're
yeah.
not selling crabs or crab meat.
You're selling
You're
a
selling-
product you
that
made here in
contains-
Reedfield, yeah.
Right. And I
but-
think that's a huge difference.
And
I
again,
think so,
getting
yeah.
back to the public hearing, this is all about your relationship one-on-one with the consumer to the farmer
Right.
or
Yeah.
provider.
Okay, so that was the only change.
The only change from the draft presented at the public hearing, correct?
There was some concern about canning, but we left it in there.
Well, there was two, some wanted, some didn't, so.
It was
Yeah.
for and against, and I think that the spirit of the law certainly was to give people that discretion, and I think that it really does come to that judgment that you were expressing.
I can't remember the
So-
argument, but there was a recommendation to strike 2B completely. But I can't see why you would do that. I think it's
No.
an integral part of the,
Yeah.
of the ordinance.
Yeah, it's a big part.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I like it as presented. I don't have anything that I personally would recommend changing. But, you know, we certainly want to make sure we do 2 readings of this.
I would make a motion that we accept the food sovereignty ordinance as presented as our first reading and move it on to a second reading.
Second.
It's a race. Okay, we have the motion to accept the first reading of the food sovereignty ordinance as presented. Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you. We'll move on to discussing the potential for medical and recreational marijuana ordinances. So this is also pursuant and following up on the public hearing. And Eric, you and Dennis met on this, is that correct?
We did, we met this morning to discuss this further.
So
Yeah,
not to get too far ahead of you,
Yeah.
my druthers on this would be to have a subcommittee develop these ordinances and bring them back to the board for review. And I had a conversation with Dennis and asked if he wanted to serve on that subcommittee.
He didn't want to, right? He didn't want to, right?
No, he said he would. I mean, I don't think it necessarily needs to
Edibles to your
be,
meeting on Sunday?
it doesn't necessarily need to be more than one select board member, but somebody else is welcome to do that too. Any opposition to having Dennis work with
None
with
here.
Eric on that? So, but while we're here, let's go ahead and discuss, and by the way, I'm adopting the language, because it's been told to me to do this, of referring to this as marijuana rather than cannabis, so there's clarity, that's what the state law says, so
State
we're all
law.
kind of in line.
Don't let my proclivities.
I had a small conversation with, I think it was Dennis, and then I had another one with Chris after the meeting last time, and I learned something that I didn't know before, which is that we have to make no matter how we do this, we have to have an ordinance that deals with adult use and an ordinance that deals with medical use. Is that correct? They're not, you can't be put together.
It's something like that. It's adult use altogether. And so I always think that adult use on one side are four separate things.
Right.
Testing, cultivation of your garden, your manufacturing, and your
Retail.
retail. So those are the four items there. With the medical side, there are only 3 articles that we are able to look at as a town to sort of change. That is medical manufacturing, medical testing, as well as the retail, basically what would be like a dispensary or a caregiver storefront. So those 3 things. The one thing that is unavailable to us is the cultivation of medical cannabis, because that is covered in the caregiver license. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's the one that's missing from the medical part. There are 2 roads, you are correct. The adult use has more things that we can control.
And we would chop that up into even more ordinances, you think?
No, I think what we would have to do is my preference to the board, so everyone knows, is to have an ordinance for each one of those. The reason being is
For
because.
all 7?
Yes, all 6 we think is what we would end up having.
Okay.
That would cover us completely. I can make the case for it in this way. This particular item has been given a certain amount of pick and choose power by the legislature. So our ability to pick and choose the pieces that we want, I think, is a very democratic sort of idea. The idea that if we want to vote for each individual one. I also think that it gives a better sort of voice to the folks in Reedfield, so that if we do have a preponderance of people who do not want retail adult use stores, that's something that is separated and able to be voted on its own. As we understand, the detriment of having a fill-in bubble sheet doesn't necessarily allow us to have a robust discussion that I think, something like this would, or food sovereignty, or anything like that. But what I do think that having each individual ordinance do is it puts the power of the choice into the hands of the Reedfield community.
And there are public hearings that will happen with these
Absolutely.
ordinances.
Absolutely, yes.
But
Obviously, we would try to gather them all on one public hearing for
Yes.
marijuana.
That is correct.
So let me see if I understand this, because it's still it's clear as mud to me.
Yeah, absolutely,
I-
absolutely.
So if we were to follow your recommendations in terms of the ordinances that we would create, we would have one that would legalize use and commercial sale of marijuana for recreational, that would be one.
Yes, sir.
I don't think we would need one that would authorize personal use and cultivation if it's limited by statute, correct?
Do we need to have a personal
We would not need
use?
an ordinance for personal use and cultivation allowed statewide because that's already there by statute.
Correct.
Not to
Okay.
allow it, but we could, and the planning board is looking
Well,
at
why would we have
options
to allow it if
regulate
it's already there by statute to be redundant, wouldn't it?
Well, it's not to allow it, it would be to regulate how and where those things happen. So for example.
So it would be a
personal use-
zoning function then?
A zoning function, yes, and
Okay,
that's what
so
we're
you
looking-
would want an ordinance talking about personal cultivation, even though technically it's guaranteed already.
Well,
Not outside of the land use ordinance.
That would be the
right.
land use.
So if I wanted to grow some, I'd have to come and file an application before the planning board saying I've got a,
No.
No, it would, so, much like much like the medical cultivation, the town cannot opt out of it. We can't say we don't
Right.
want it, it's already allowed. So what we can do is put in provisions that regulate, just like we do with all businesses or all activity in town, maybe where it happens and how it
okay.
happens.
Would that be a function of an ordinance or an adjustment in our planning and zoning regulations?
The latter.
Both.
The latter.
Okay, the latter,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So that wouldn't be an ordinance issue.
So Ralph, I think
Right.
I can help clarify this. You're reading on the sheet in our packet,
I'm going down the
yes?
sheet of what's
Okay,
allowed
so
and what
on the-
isn't. And
It's the third bullet down under Marijuana Legalization Act. Am I right, Dennis?
establishes
State licensing process for 4 types of adult marijuana establishment: cultivation facilities, retail stores, manufacturing facilities, and testing facilities. Those are the 4 things that we have the option on.
For adult use.
All right,
Right,
so,
so everything
to
else in
opt
that,
in or
The
out.
personal use, anybody in their
Anybody can-
basement or
yeah.
their backyard
Yeah,
can
all right.
have those
right,
so,
premature plants.
so our ordinance could include or exclude any one of those things depending on what our public feedback and our sentiment is.
Or-
Correct.
or-
Yeah.
at the ballot box.
And I kind of think I'm a visual learner, so I just drew this out so we could kind of see. This is just sort of the thing. These would be the things that we would have to opt into on the adult use side. 1, 2, 3, 4. The other medical side, we're just looking at storefronts, manufacturing, and testing. Cultivation is included and inherent in their licensing. And the personal use, we can grow our plants, we can have our garden right now.
Yeah.
But the only reason we would pass any ordinance that deals with personal use is if we want Reed Field flavor in that particular way. Does that make sense? So it might be that, the state statute allows us to grow all of our plants, but in order for us in Reed Field to have some kind of say in it, we would pass our own, right?
Something that's, so for example, one of the things the planning board is looking at currently is a 20-foot setback, I think, or maybe it's more than that, but
Okay.
a setback so that if you grow marijuana, whether it's for your personal use, whether it's for medical cultivation, or whether it's for retail, recreational cultivation, that you do it a certain distance away from your neighbors, and that if you are a bigger grower, that you do it in a certain way that minimizes impacts, such as having it in a greenhouse if it's more than 250 square feet. Those are some of the provisions they're discussing currently. Changes to the land use that would address these issues of cultivation that are somewhat separate from, but related
I would like
to
to
the
keep
other
them separate and
ordinances.
distinct
Yeah.
in terms of, I think it's,
They
in
have
terms
to.
of enforceability and understanding, it's probably a better way to go from my perspective, anyway.
Well, if you have separate ordinances for each one, then if there's something people don't want, they can not vote for it.
Sure, we should offer a menu,
Yeah.
given the
And
options
it's
that are.
exactly, yes, Ralph, that was exactly the language. It is a menu. You get to order, and I think the specificity of having them separated allows it. And that, I think, is good for the people to have a voice and choice.
Now, I
think the only-
asked Dennis if you can't commingle medical and adult use, and he said right now you can't.
Yes,
Right.
at
But the-
8:15 right now, you can't. There is in session bills that indicate same facility, different doors, same facility, different rooms.
They just need to put it,
It's-
So right now.
Getting silly.
It is getting silly. So right now, no. And right now, no.
Okay, well,
Okay.
thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah,
And I like the idea of individual ordinances as permitted by statute, so that people get to vote up or down on a case-by-case basis. Not everybody may want retail,
Yeah.
but if there's a retail opt-in, they can say no.
But if they want cultivation and it's all in one ordinance and they
Yeah.
Well, there's
vote
a-
down.
Exactly.
And I just want to make sure that everybody understands too, that it's this board that puts forward these ordinances, so.
Yes.
Out of the 7 ordinances, maybe we're only gonna put forward 5, or maybe we're
Yeah.
gonna put forward all 7, because we want to get, the vote on it. But the board does have,
Say,
We can
Let's
cherry
say
pick the
that's-
ones we
that's
want to
right.
present.
that's absolutely correct.
so,
I mean, my own personal preference in all of this would be one master ordinance for each. And after talking a little bit about this today, I'm convinced that the menu is the better way to go. I would hope down the road we could then, once we have all
Yeah.
this put together, roll it up into a master
Here,
ordinance.
here.
Once we have
That's a
some
great approach,
experience, we can,
Yeah, then merge
Make a
the
better choice.
ordinance.
And I've thought about that, and Bruce, and I love your brevity is one of the best parts that we sort of experience, I think, in this board. We try not to have extraneous things. And I've looked back at issues and think about things, but to me, that really is the best approach, because we have the ability to parse them out. And I think it's the best.
I think we're gonna have to be, as we were talking about the beach earlier, and I know we've had a small public hearing already. Never mind, we had a small turnout for a public hearing. It wasn't a small hearing. I think you will still get a significant part of our voting population who will show up, not having read anything about it, and they will be here on voting day, and they'll be, so what is this all about? So I think we have to be very cognizant of the fact that we need to do a good job on our mailer that goes out not with the warrant, but that goes out ahead of time explaining the menu approach.
Yes.
It has nothing to do with whether you want marijuana to be legal or not. That is already said and done. This is about how it is handled in the town from these other aspects.
Absolutely.
And I think it could be really, really long this year at the ballot box.
Yes.
If
and
we
I-
don't do
yeah.
enough front loading for people so that they at least have the opportunity to read something.
Right. I think part of what I would like to do, especially with the Facebook page, pertaining to this, but also for a lot of the ordinances, would be to kind of go through it. You know what I mean? It doesn't, not to land on a position, but to literally have a video that would sort of say, this is the ordinance that we're looking at, we post it online, we give a preview already. It's not like having someone there talking about it would be any kind of overstep. Those are things that I've already sort of
I think
grinding
that's
on.
a great idea.
Yes, ma'am. And so I'm
Not
just
only
trying to
there,
think of
but
that.
on our public access TV channel at
Absolutely.
1301 or wherever it is at the end of the list.
just beyond
So thank you.
Mars.
And,
Okay, so I think we've decided that we have a subcommittee.
Oh, Dennis.
The window is very tight.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
we have a month.
Yeah.
We have a month to put this
So-
together, and
We will have a
Get
public
final
hearing
language.
within 30 days on a set of ordinances. And we should do everything in our power to, again, promote that as broadly as we can to get real good input on it.
Yeah.
Because we might also get, some feedback that doesn't lead to striking the ordinance, but to perfect it more.
Tweaking.
Absolutely,
know.
absolutely.
So
Well,
that's-
we've done the
Right.
postcard mailers in the past for important things, and I think this is probably one of those.
This is a big deal.
Yeah.
yeah, well, I think that tying in the.
Well, you're discussing
Discussion.
7 ordinances in one night. I think, even if they're on one topic, I think
I
that's.
don't think they have to be broadly drawn.
I hope
No,
that they're
no,
gonna
I
be
don't-
very
I-
similar
no,
I-
in
I-
wording
I-
and substance,
Yeah.
just with the
Just
different
each one
topics.
has their own
So,
title.
that- yeah.
That's right,
Right.
and actually, for me as chair, it's going to make the public hearing a little easier, because we could just deal with one, then go to next,
Boom,
deal with
boom,
one.
And I know that we're public here, and I just want to say this because this is something I care about. When we have these public meetings and things like that, please know that, you know, and I say this in all seriousness, when you come out and you have these discussions about cannabis and things like that, it should be, to me, in my eye, a judgment-free zone. And I don't want anyone who has any kind of stigma or worry that showing up and maybe speaking in support or sharing your story, we just appreciate the feedback. And I spoke with someone who came to the workshop, and she told me that she knew people and friends and families that are in Reedfield that felt a little self-conscious because of the topic. And I respect that. I understand that. It's 2020, and there's been years of that sort of negative ad campaign. But I think this is something that can affect our town, have an impact. And so if you have feedback, please share it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good, I guess we're all set with that item.
Mhm.
So we'll move on to 20088, which is to hear an update on regional broadband and consider Phase 2. I don't really have an update on that. We did complete the Phase 1, and we had mentioned that. And so really, Phase 2 is where we get the information, if you will.
We got it.
No, we'll get.
Cost estimates and
Yeah.
more substantive. The
Yeah.
first mapping and
Was-
inventory of assets
Right.
was the first phase. The second phase
Okay.
is the,
Is what can we do?
exactly, yeah.
It's pretty exciting.
And actually, the cost of what we can do is $1,000 on Phase 2.
$1,000.
On phase
Yes.
2. yep.
So, and that's because, actually, we estimated more.
We did.
Because
We approved more,
some towns
didn't we?
moved around, or what
Well,
was the deal?
we had better results from the grant
Oh,
process than
that's
we
right.
expected, so we do have.
We got more money in the grant.
We're looking better than we were originally, but we still need authorization for that second phase.
And are we meeting Thursday night?
We are meeting
I think
Thursday
so.
night.
Okay, good. I
And
had-
is this our payment in full?
This is our
This-
payment in
this
full
would be-
for phase 2.
Phase 2.
So I'll make a motion to authorize the town manager to submit a payment of $1,000 to Fayette to cover the cost of the Phase 2 planning and communications process for broadband.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Anybody need the motion restated? No. All in favor? Thank you.
I don't mind if we chalk, I just thought if we got that out of the way, we wouldn't run out of time.
Yep. Well, we do have a couple more minutes, and I was hoping we could talk very briefly about union negotiators. We sent a letter to the union sent a letter to us. We both want to negotiate. Last time we negotiated, we said we wanted to do that in good faith and not have a contract lapse, and that is exactly what we accomplished. And so I'm hoping that we can do that again. So I think we ought to have a couple of negotiators too. That's what we used last time. It was John and I. It's a bunch of extra meetings. I'm willing to, for the sake of consistency, since I was at the last round, to do it again. If you so desire me to, if there's other
Oh,
people.
please.
It was a very good process. We worked very well together, I must
Good.
say.
Yeah.
Well, I think we need the consistency
I think it
of
helps.
you being there,
Yeah.
yeah.
I love to get the updates. It's thick, but it's good to see.
So we do need somebody else. You could designate me alone to do it, but I really would rather have somebody else on the board participate.
I will help as long as everybody feels that that would be appropriate.
Yeah.
Haven't done it in a long time, but I have.
I would be appreciative of you doing that.
Yes, here, here.
Okay, so
Springs my busy time at work, so.
let's have
You have a busy time.
okay, so just record that then. Ralph and I will be the designated negotiators.
And will there be
And I'll
any,
talk with you at some point. We'll probably have an executive session to discuss how we're going to approach the contract, and they'll have their meeting as well. And then we'll set a first date, and then we'll figure out how many meetings we have to go forward. It'll probably be a few. So,
It's very interesting to see what the arbitration statute is in play at the state capitol right now, which would make for negotiating difficulties, I think, if it were to pass.
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?